What is going on, guys and gals? Brooklyn bound the Raid Scientist here, and well, it's a new year, and that means we got to look forward to the final shape coming this June. We're going to have a plethora of new weapons to go out and grind for, so with that, I wanted to make a video to go over all the best weapons that came out in the past year of Destiny. So maybe if you've taken a break or missed some content over the last year, this video is going to cover what I feel like are the top tier weapons in each slot to go after before the final shape comes out. So, today we're going to cover the best exotic weapons to chase, the best legendaries in the kinetic or primary slot, special slot, and the heavy slots. There are some weapons that shine in both PvP and PvE, and some that shine in more one type of content versus the other. We'll have some examples of each. If you enjoyed today's video, I ask you to consider subscribing to the channel. I would love to try to hit 10,000 subscribers this year and need your support to do it. Now, when going through all the weapons that released this year, talked with some friends, came up with a pretty conclusive list. There are some weapons I felt were deserving of the list, but wanted to keep the video manageable in length. So in the end, I'm going to toss in some honorable mentions for you to look into as well. Alright, so let's get started with the best legendary primary weapons that have come out since Lightfall released. First off, we have Igneous Hammer, the solar 120 RPM hand cannon that is achieved through Trials of Osiris and focused at Saint 14. This hand cannon was reprised from its original Season 13 version with some pretty good perk options that have made it a big advantage to have in PvP. While hand cannons always seem to reign near the top in PvP, the reprised Igneous can get Keep Away and Eye of the Storm, making it very good at long ranges and in competitive playlists where slower ranged play is more prominent. It can also get Rapid Hit or Heal Clip in the third column and Incandescent and Frenzy in the fourth column. Remember, you don't necessarily need to go flawless in Trials of Osiris to get this weapon. You can unlock it via Trials engrams earned from just playing the game mode, and then focus it at Saint 14. 120 hand cannons still hit pretty hard and are especially effective options in the Crucible. Next up on our top list of primary weapons from this year is Rufus's Fury, which is a Strand 720 RPM auto rifle and likely the best in slot legendary auto rifle in the game at the moment. There are a ton of perk options on this one that make it a very desirable weapon. Reconstruction and rewind rounds in the third column, reduce reloading, and paired with damaging perks in the fourth column like Target Lock, Frenzy, Adrenaline Junkie, and Hatchling make it a great option. This weapon comes from the Root of Nightmares raid and is fully craftable, which means you can get the enhanced versions of each perk by unlocking the pattern. You can also get added versions from the Master raid, which rotates with the featured raids. The perk combinations make this an extremely effective weapon in clearing groups of adds and dense encounters with a lot going on. On auto rifles, I'm typically looking for barrels and mags that improve stability and range, so Arrowhead Break and Corkscrew Rifling in the first column and Ricochet rounds or High Cal rounds in the second column. Overall, it's a very strong weapon, and I use it frequently in raids, dungeons, and nightfalls as well, so don't sleep on Rufus's Fury. Next up is a weapon that quite possibly is at the top of usage numbers in 2023 in Destiny 2 PvP. There were months over the summer where it was used the most in Trials of Osiris globally by every single week. We're talking about the Strand SMG, the Immortal. This 720 RPM Strand SMG rolled with Rangefinder and Target Lock as top perk options. Unfortunately, this shout out to Immortal is currently only that. Just a shout out, because as it is one of the best weapons of the year, it was also removed from the Trials of Osiris loot pool this season and can't be earned at the moment. My guess is it will likely be brought back in the future, but we will have to wait and see. This weapon was so powerful and so popular, it not only got a nerf, it got an entire aggressive frame SMG type nerfed. Bungie dropped the base damage and precision multipliers on aggressive frame SMGs, and Immortal itself got a base range reduction, and ultimately the Rangefinder perk got completely reworked. There is no doubt this was one of the best, if not the best, kinetic weapon in 2023. Even after these changes, Immortal is still a very strong option in the Crucible. The final weapon on our list of 2023's best primary weapons is Apocal Integration. This was released in the Season of the Deep as a quest on Neomuna. This is a reward from finishing the quest line and has a curated roll with 2 choices of perks. It's a 140 RPM solar hand cannon and can get Keep Away or Stats Furl in the third column and Incandescent or Eye of the Storm in the fourth. The stats for all and incandescent roll can be very strong in PvE, especially with Solar 3.0 subclasses and fragments improving ignitions and spreading scorch. While Sunshot and Zauli's Bane right now are very popular options, Apocalypse is right there and doesn't take up an exotic slot. If you have a Zauli's Bane crafted with explosive payload, then I'd probably stick with that, but if not, Apocalypse Integration is a perfect alternative. Okay, moving on from primary weapons, let's talk my choices for the best special weapons released this year in Destiny. Starting with the most recent, and arguably the best, Scatter Signal. Scatter Signal is a rapid-fire frame strand fusion rifle that goes in the primary slot. This is quite possibly the best fusion rifle in the entire game at the moment due to the perk options it can come with. In the third column, Overflow, or maybe Slice are your best option, and in the fourth column, you definitely want to go with Controlled Burst, which grants a 20% damage buff from getting a kill or hitting all the bolts in a single shot, and it also decreases the charge time on the next shot. With fusion rifles still reigning near the top in PvE content, you definitely want to pick this up and collect all the patterns to get it crafted. Don't forget the Origin perk as well that will refill the magazine and give you bonus range and handling when you become critically wounded. It is very rare we see a regular seasonal vendor weapon be this powerful, but this is near the top of all the weapons that were released in the last year. The next special weapon at the top of the list is the new Arc Waveframe Grenade Launcher Undercurrent. This is the Vanguard weapon that can be unlocked from Nightfalls and focused with engrams at Commander Zavala. Waveframe grenade launchers are still at the top of the meta list in PvE content due to their strong ability to clear out large groups of enemies with very little effort. Now while I say that, the Arc Waveframe Grenade Launcher Forbearance from Vow of the Disciple is slightly better than Undercurrent due to the chain reaction perk it can get in the fourth column. Undercurrent is still very good and in some cases pairs better with Arc subclasses than Forbearance can. Undercurrent can get stats for all or ambitious in the Assassin in the third column, but Volt Shot in the fourth column. Remember that Volt Shot not only chains to other enemies, but it also applies Jolt on your next hit. So if you're using an Arc subclass and have built-into jolting and blinding enemies, I'd give this the edge over Forbearance. Either way, it's a very strong special weapon and is easily obtained by a solo player just grinding through the Nightfall playlist when it's the weekly weapon. Alright, moving on our list of the best special weapons from the past year is the reprised version of the Supremacy. This is a rapid-fire sniper rifle achieved from the Last Wish raid, and from the refresh in Season 21, it can now be crafted as well. It has some new perks that make it pretty powerful, even for a rapid-fire sniper. Specifically, it can get rewind rounds and 4th times the charm, which are very synergistic, essentially overloading the magazine and allowing you to fire excessively as long as you maintain hitting your crits. This makes it a very good secondary option for damaging bosses after heavy ammo has been used. It can also get Vorpal Weapon in the fourth column and Kinetic Tremors, so it depends on how you want to use this weapon, damaging it for bosses or as a secondary for majors and minors. Either way, with the buffs we've seen to sniper rifles in the last few months, the Supremacy should definitely be a piece in your arsenal. And finally, the last special weapon on my list, the best weapons from this year, is 2 weapons. Yeah, I'm cheating. But they are Loaded Question and the Eremite. Now the reason I'm combining these two into one ranking is they are both high impact frame fusions that can both roll with Controlled Burst in the fourth column and both roll with a base impact of 95. Remember that Controlled Burst gives you that damage buff after a kill or hitting all your fusion pellets on a target and decreases charge time on the next shot. So while high impact frame fusions don't usually get as much love in PvE over rapid fire frames, these two with Controlled Burst become just as reliable. Loaded Question is an Arc fusion that comes from Nightfalls, and the Eremite is from Season of the Witch and is craftable and solar. I'd say pick either one of these depending on whether you prefer solar builds or Arc builds, and while Eremite is craftable and can get enhanced perks, Loaded Question can get auto-loading holster and overflow, which reduces the amount of reloads you need to do. So it was really hard for me to rank one of these above the other because they're so similar, so I just ranked them both equally. Okay, now let's move on to heavy weapons, as this year we saw some really good options drop that are still very strong even today. First up, Apex Predator, a solar adaptive frame rocket launcher which was reprised in Season 21 from the Last Wish raid. This weapon is craftable if you collect 5 patterns, and is pretty easily farmed in the Last Wish raid, typically by just rerunning the Callie encounter over and over again, which can be done in a few minutes with a well-coordinated team. What makes the reprised Apex Predator so strong is its ability to get reconstruction in the third column, which can get you an extra rocket in the magazine and will reload the rocket launcher on its own over time. This makes it great to fire and then swap to a secondary damaging option while it reloads itself, then swapping back to maintain a solid damage cycle. In the fourth column are a lot of good damage boosting perk options as well, including Bait and Switch, Vorpal Weapon, or Explosive Light. If you're not interested in proccing the Bait and Switch, then I'd go for Vorpal or Explosive Light, but remember that Bait and Switch is a whopping 35% damage bonus, while Explosive Light caps at 25% and Vorpal at 10% for heavy weapons. Either way, Apex Predator is one of my most used rocket launchers to date. Next up on our list is the Cataphract GL3, which is an adaptive frame strand heavy grenade launcher. This comes from Trials of Osiris and can be earned through Trials Engrams and focusing at Saint 14. Heavy grenade launchers are very popular options in PvP, and Cataphract can get autoloading holster or impulse amplifier, and Bait and Switch, chain reaction, or explosive light. Spike grenades is in my opinion the best option as well because it drastically increases the grenade impact damage from Saj to your target. I'd say if you aren't a big PvP player and don't want to dip your toes in the Trials of Osiris, then the Wendigo GL3 is a very similar choice that is arc instead of strand that you can get from Nightfalls, and the perk pools are very similar. But I'd still give the slight edge to Cataphract based on the perk combinations. Alright, moving on, by far the best heavy machine gun released this year, and is currently the best legendary heavy machine gun in the game in my opinion, is Song of Ir Yût. This adaptive frame arc machine gun comes from the Crota's End raid in either the Abyss encounter or the Ir Yût Deathsinger encounter. It is fully craftable and has some absolutely monster perks. Sword Logic in the fourth column absolutely raises this machine gun above others for its ability to increase its damage output as you kill enemies. And Reconstruction in the third column allows you to naturally reload on its own to over 100 shots in the mag. If not using Reconstruction, Rewind Rounds or Feeding Frenzy are also very good here, as they reduce the times you need to reload or speed up the reload itself, respectively. Aside from Sword Logic in the fourth column, you can also get Target Lock or even something like Volt Shot, but I think Sword Logic's probably the best here. With the animal economy being so strong on heavy machine guns, this weapon is a solid choice for non-boss encounters where you're not needing to shell out damage on a single target. It's also a very good option for things like Nightfalls and Grandmasters as well. Next up is the Void Heavy Linear Fusion Rifle, Doomed Petitioner. This released this season and is achieved through seasonal activities and can be focused at Riven. It's fully craftable as well. Linear fusion rifles have been tweaked a little bit by Bungie so they aren't as strong as they were last year, but they still have much better ammo economy than rockets, and with targets large crit spots or with a divinity it can be a strong damage option still. Doom Petitioner is a very good weapon due to rolling with both Reconstruction and Surrounded. So in boss fights where you can proc Surrounded, like in the new Warlord's Ruin dungeon, you can get 40% increased damage if you have 3 enemies nearby, and Reconstruction allows it to fill up to 10 shots or more in the magazine, so keep that in mind. To cheat again here, Briar's Contempt Linear Fusion Rifle from the Root of Nightmares raid that also released this year is very similar to Doomed Petitioner, and is also fully craftable with Reconstruction and Surrounded. Briar's Contempt is solar, while Doomed Petitioner is void. They have the same base mag size, same impact, and essentially the same reload speed, so you can honestly flip a coin on which is better. Doomed Petitioner is just much easier to acquire and craft if you don't have either, or if you don't really like to raid. Alright, now it gets a little bit more interesting here because we can't forget the exotic weapons either. We've had 2 dungeons, 2 raids, plus various seasonal exotics and Lightfall specific exotics released this year, so which ones are the best? First and foremost, the clear winner, in my opinion, of all of them is Conditional Finality. This is the exotic slug shotgun from the Nezarec encounter in the Root of Nightmares raid. It is a random drop chance and can be farmed when Root of Nightmares is the weekly featured raid. It is incredibly strong in both PvE and PvP. In PvP, the pellet spread is very consistent, allowing for very good one-hit kill ranges. It can freeze targets even if they're in a Well of Radiance or a bubble, and in PvE it deals a nasty amount of damage to Majors, Minors, can freeze champions, ignite enemies, can prevent barrier champions from going immune, stun unstoppables, and reloads very quickly. It's arguably the best raid exotic in all of Destiny currently, as Divinity did get kind of a slight nerf and is really only very situational, and Anarchy took a massive ammo reserve hit about a year ago. Overall, it's a weapon that can be pretty much used everywhere in all content and has a ton of build potential for both stasis and solar builds. I'd say if there's one weapon from this entire video that you should definitely want to grind for, it's Conditional Finality. It is the best weapon of the entire year. The next exotic up on our list is Final Warning, this Strand sidearm from the Lightfall release. Now, I can't believe I'm actually putting a sidearm in this video, to be honest. I hate sidearms. I don't like how they feel or how they fire. And upon the release of Lightfall, Final Warning wasn't that strong. However, Bungie buffed all sidearms by 20% back in Season of the Deep, and this thing now hits like an absolute truck. Hold down the trigger marks a target, and if you hip fire, the projectiles will track to that target without having to aim at all. If you aim down sights, the projectiles will have even higher damage to that target. Fully charged shots are also going to unravel targets. And even without running Strand subclass, this weapon is very, very strong, and when you pair it with Strand, it's even better. While it pains me to put a sidearm in this list, there is no way to discredit how good this exotic is. Next up on the list of best exotics released this year is Dragon's Breath, which is the rocket launcher from this season. I used it in my solo run on the Warlord's Ruin Dungeon. It's amazing in raids and Nightfalls as well. If you're running solar builds, it's even better, as you can inflict even more scorch stacks across other enemies. What makes Dragon's Breath so good is its ability to shine by damaging a boss or an enemy over time, allowing you to swap to other weapons for additional damage. And it reloads itself by igniting nearby targets. The ability to do passive damage while actively using another weapon is absolutely meta in a ton of cases, and you can really stack your damage numbers here on bosses. With the Catalyst, you can refill the fuel even faster to get max stacks, and also get fire sprites to drop on kills. It's not too common we see a free seasonal exotic weapon this good, but grab it off your season pass and give it a try. It's essentially Witherhoard with more fire and more explosions. And finally, the last exotic on my list of best released this year is Quicksilver Storm. This came out with the Lightfall release as part of the pre-order bonus, and while it wasn't working properly on release, it's since been fixed. This 720 RPM auto rifle is very strong in the Crucible, with very good stability and decent recoil direction. It boasts an alternative firing mode which switches to grenade firing, which is very strong in both PvP and PvE. The exotic perk Rocket Tracers allows the next shot to be tracking micro rocket. Oh, and the Catalyst turns it into a strand weapon where final blows create tangles. There really isn't anything negative to say about it. When paired with any strand build that uses tangles, it's even stronger. And also recall that Bungie buffed primary exotic weapons with 40% damage buff a while back, gives it very strong upside against normal minor enemies, and for majors and champions you can switch to the grenade firing mode for even more damage. It's basically two weapons in one. Alright, so we went over what I think are the 3 or 4 best choices of each weapon that have been released this year, but I wanted to also quickly toss out a few honorable mentions as we wrap this up. I really wanted to cover these in the video and more in depth, but I just didn't want the video to get too long. So we'll do a quick final rundown of ones that I think that should make the list as well. For primary weapons, Abyss Defiant, a craftable solar 360 auto rifle from Crota's End, can roll with Subsistence or Reconstruction and Incandescent, and is very worthwhile grabbing. Secondly, a very good PvP SMG, since the Immortal is no longer obtainable, is Unending Tempest. It's a stasis 600 RPM SMG and has a ton of perk options, so getting the perfect roll might take some luck because it isn't craftable. But things like Dynamic Sway, Moving Target and Subsistence in the third column, and Target Lock or Adrenaline Junkie in the fourth make it very, very good in PvP. Another honorable mention goes to the Cold Comfort rocket launcher, which comes from the Ghost of the Deep Dungeon. This rocket is a stasis aggressive frame that can get Envious Assassin and Bait and Switch, Bipod, or Explosive Light in the fourth column. With these perk combinations and the origin trait that overflows the magazine when you revive someone or do a finisher, you can get up to 4 rockets in the mag and deal some pretty chunky damage to bosses without having to reload as much. So it's not a quick guaranteed 4 rockets in the mag, as it does require a little bit of work, but overall a very strong rocket launcher. And finally, I have to mention this last honorable mention, the Navigator. This exotic trace rifle also comes from the Ghost of the Deep Dungeon and is a Banner of War Titan's dream, allowing you to shell out some ridiculous damage that you've probably even seen clips of on YouTube, people 2-manning and 3-manning raid bosses. The Catalyst gives it a grapple point, allowing you to constantly use the grapple melee attack, and it also severs targets, grants allies and the user Woven Mail, which is a very strong damage resistance. Pair this with something like Banner of War, and Titans are shelling out tons of damage and are pretty much unkillable. Overall, we saw a ton of great weapons released over the last year. Some of them have been actually game-breaking. Most of these are still available via the sources I've mentioned, so get out there and add them to your arsenal while you can. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time, Guardians. Stay safe out there.